All right. All right, I'd like to say good morning to everybody. It is February the what? 18th, Saturday, early in the morning, too. Oh, dark 30. And tonight's topic is going to be, or this morning's topic is going to be step 2 and step 3. The difference between the two of the steps and their relevance to step 12. And in this video, we're going to look at step 2 and step 3 and see how different they are. How different they are and what step 2 calls for and what step 3 calls for, and how when they come together in step 11, what the outcome should be. You know, when I sit in meetings and I hear people talk about step 2 or they talk about step 3, in my mind, when I hear them talk about them literally, I'm not really understanding what a person says. When you look at step 2, and I'm just saying look at the step only, step 2 says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And then step 3 says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand him. Now, when you look in the basic text, it talks about a power greater than ourselves in step 2, and in step 3, it talks about a higher power. And the higher power in step 3 is equated to a God, a quote-unquote God. And for right now, I don't want to focus on God. I want to focus on how the step is used. Now, the term God, it says the God of your understanding. And what the step is telling you, say, okay, you can have, excuse me, a God. It tells you to get a God of your understanding. So whatever you want to get for, so when you get this God power or God force or entity, you shape it to your understanding. In step 3, it says a power greater than ourselves, and it says a power. Notice it says a power. Now, since it says a power, then that means that there's a choice out there. There's a choice of a whole bunch of powers. A whole bunch of powers. In the basic text of NA, it says a power greater than ourselves could be addiction. It says it is addiction. It says addiction is a power greater than ourselves. Why? Because addiction affects what? The thinking. It affects the thinking, which is obsession, which is the obsession or the ongoing thought or fixed idea of a person, place, or thing. It also talks about spiritual principles, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And in the second step, the operative, and it's not the only spiritual principle, but the operative spiritual principle is what? Open-mindedness. This step in both fellowships, AA and NA, and even in the big book, asks the recovering person to become what? Open-minded. In step 3, where it talks about God, and we refer to it as a higher power, and it says you can come to one of your own understanding, it's talking about one. It's talking about, it's specific. It says you get a God or a higher power, and you can come to your own understanding. So my point being is, how can a power greater than oneself and a higher power be the same thing? When I'm sitting in meetings and I hear people, especially when we're sharing about step 2, they think they communicate the idea that the power greater than oneself is God. I'm saying that's not what I get. I don't get that. Okay, so let's move on. Let's start from the beginning of the step of step 2. It says we came to. And I know, and when I'm listening in the rooms, and I know from being making AA meetings a while back, there was a pamphlet out that was in the early 80s, in the late 80s and before. It was a step 2 pamphlet, and it said we came to, or no, it actually said came to, and then it said came to believe. And then the explanation was came to, meaning that a person was coming from one place to another place. It said came to, and it was related to becoming conscious, that you was in a dark place and you became conscious. That's what that came to was about. And then it said it came to believe. And then came to believe was an insinuation or point to that a person came to what? Faith, because belief is equated to faith. So the individual came to believe that a power, and it says a power, not the power, not the power. And it don't say higher power, not in the step. In the narrations, it do. But the step don't say it. So do you go by the narration or do you go by the step? Because if you're going by the narration, you have to understand, especially in our recovery literature, for example, in NA, when you look at it works how and why, the narration is different. When you go to the infamous flat book or the step working guides, the narration is different. It's different in the basic text. It's different in the big book. It's different in other AA literature. So you have to go by the steps, because the step itself is what we all refer to. Not to, in other words, let me say this: anybody can write a narration based on their experience. We just going on the experience of the group at that time that wrote this material. So I say stick to what the step is talking about. So let's move on. Now the condition in step 2 is, there's a condition in step 2. So let me back up a little bit and let me say this. Inside of step 2, in both fellowships, and especially in Narcotics Anonymous, the step, the narration, the narrators of the step in the basic text say you cannot get no recovery without step 2. That means you won't even have a step 3. Why? Because you don't have no faith in nothing. There's no principles at work. But let's look at the step, take it apart, put it together, and see what it says. So I already talked about we came to believe, we came to. Then we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So let's look at the overall step first. I'm being restored to sanity. And how and where is the insanity? The insanity is in my thinking. Where did I get it from? I got it from step 1. In step 1, it says we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. Well, addiction is not the drugs. Addiction is not the food. Addiction is not the alcohol. Addiction is not the sex, the gambling, the work, the fantasy. It's none of that. Addiction is the obsessive compulsion, and is the obsessive compulsion which is lodged in the thinking, which is the obsessive thinking along with the compulsive behavior. I had to correct myself. Obsessive thinking in coordinates with the compulsive behavior. So you have 2 powers at work, obsession and compulsion. Why? Because step one says we admitted that we were powerless over our what? Our addiction, our obsessive and our compulsive thinking and behavior. That what? That our lives had become unmanageable. And the unmanageability resulted in the compulsive behavior and the obsessive thinking. That's the insanity. So when you jump down to step 2, and it says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So how did I get restored? So in step 1, when I made that admission, it says when says we admitted that we were powerless, it says that we admitted, ED, that we were powerless. So I looked at experience where my life was in shambles, whether I was hitting bottom or whether I was hitting bottom through my symptoms or something or anything else, work-related, conversation-wise, anything that's affecting my thinking. So that's what I admitted to. I admitted to the powerlessness. It wasn't nothing. Everything I tried I couldn't do. And I admitted to the unmanageability of those situations. Also called the insanity. So moving over to step 2, what happened in between step 1 and step 2, there was a situation where there was a choice I had to make. And the choice was really looking at, the choice affected my thinking. It was like, what restored me to sanity? When I hit my bottom, that's what restored me to sanity. It was the use of the symptom. And I just named quite a few of them. That brought my addiction, that brought me face to face to my addiction, my obsessive and compulsive thinking. It got me to a point where I couldn't what? Deny it anymore. There was no denial. And then I admitted, step 1, we admitted, then I made the admission. That it was my thinking, my obsessive and my compulsive thinking that got me to the point that I was closed-minded. And that was something that I had to get what? Honest about, because what? Step 1 is a step of honesty. So what happened was, as a result of that power greater than myself, I gained some faith. I gained faith in what? You could say it's God, and now you're on the way to the higher power, but until I look at what restored me to sanity, the faith in God will never be in sight. It will never be in sight. I could say it is, but it will always reflect in my behavior. It will always be reflected in my behavior. So, looking at step 3 again, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So what was my will? When I made that decision, what did I turn? When I made the decision to turn my will and my life over, what was the decision? People could say it's God. You could say it's anything. But I will also say at the end of the day, if you're a recovering person, you made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of the program that you're working. Now, if I'm wrong, put it in my comments. That's what you did. You said, okay, even if you said, okay, God, I turn my will and my life over to you. If you had a sponsor, he said, okay, let's go to step 4. Let's go to step 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He didn't say turn your will over and stop. I don't care what kind of recovery you went to. And sure, I will agree to the ones out there that's saying, well, a lot of people work step 1, 2, and 3, or they 2-step. 1, 2, step 1, 2, step 1, 2. And yeah, you can stay clean or you can stay sober on step 1 and 2 alone. But recovery will become a challenge if you don't take the next step. So let's say you're atheist or an agnostic, and you take the God piece and you throw it out. But I would say this, you still at some point, when you got to step 2, you said, I'm not gonna look at this God stuff anymore because I'm an atheist and I'm an agnostic. What you did do is you took your energy and you focused it. You had a central point. You had a central point that you focused your energy because you could not work in an effective step 2 without having a focus. And that's all the God piece is. They just use it as a focus. They ain't saying, God of Israel or God of Muslims or God of Christians or nothing. It don't mean that, and it clearly states it in all literature. But some people, what I believe anyway, they so resentful and angry at God, and they got this they call it organized religion. They missed the whole boat. Yeah. And I say this, most people that come into any type of recovery program is agnostic at best, let alone an atheist. Because whatever your primary symptom was, whether it was sex, whether it was drugs, whether it was food, whether it was gambling, whether it was or any other symptom you could think of, that was your God. That's what you worship. That's what got you here, wherever you at. I know a lot of people ain't gonna hit the button on that one, but that's just the truth. So then when you come into a recovery program, out of shame and guilt, you're gonna pick you up a God. Some that you had abandoned a long time ago for 10 to 15 years, using whatever it is you was using. And that's some real shit right there. I'm sorry. So going down to step 3, we made a decision to turn our will in our lives. Why did I make a decision? Because the one thing I understood is that I couldn't work this program, the rest of the recovery program, without having some faith in something, without having my energy, without having my spiritual energy through spiritual principles directed to the source. And I'll call it source. Now I'm going to say this right here. Y'all ready? You ready for this one? How you going to understand God? Please tell me that. But the reason why it's given, what I believe is just temporary. It's something so to give the individual a focus. Because what do AA say about the God? They say good orderly direction. You can't, the so-called atheists can't rationalize not believing in that. Good orderly direction. God. That's what they called it. But however, and I will admit to, and I will agree to that Christianity did kick in and had a lot of influence in the steps progress, which they didn't have no right to be. Christianity kicked in. Oh, and Judaism. Because what the Jews said, a lot of the Jewish people said, was we needed something that was, we need a recovery program that would conform to our beliefs. And it happened to also, the Muslims did it. And they came up with their own recovery programs. And then we had the LGBT, then we got the gays and the lesbians, the men and the women. So hell. So what happened in the recovery program? But since the program itself comes from a merciful source, and I'll just say source, comes from a merciful source, we all get a chance to recover. Why? Because there's many paths to recovery, but it's only one recovery. So now let's move up to step 11. So I went over step 1, 2, and 3. So let's go to step 11. In step 11, it says we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. So let me back down to step 2. What step 2 gives is the spiritual awakening. You know, sure, the awakening process happens soon as the individual or the group entered in recovery on step 1 through the admission. But what happens is in step 2 crystallizes. It says it's like putting it in ink. You make the verbal admission. And you talk about what? You become conscious in the here and now. Step 1 brings the individual into the here and the group, because groups are addicted too. They definitely are. Watch a riot one time and ask what happened. Any kind of riot. So anyway, what happens is the power greater than selves and the restoration to sanity is the spiritual awakening. And what happened is whatever restored you to sanity, whether it was a good experience or a bad experience, whatever power at the moment restored you to sanity, that's when the spiritual awakening occurred. And so when we get back up to step 11, it says we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact and to improve the conscious contact. Remember, conscious contact, step 2 restored you to consciousness. It was a formal admission through the power greater than self. And that's how the conscious contact began. But it's happening in the meditative state. And meditation is up to the individual, just like prayer. Prayer and what the program gives the individual and the group is the freedom to pray and meditate on how they need to, or what's best for them, best on their. I don't have to be a Buddhist or a Hindu, none of that. I don't have to go take any type of classes. I ain't got to do none of that. However, I will say for a better understanding of what I'm doing in the prayer and the meditative process, and there are processes to become spiritually awakened, is I might want to go take a class into something. But here it is in the program, the program as a whole don't have a what? We ain't gonna say go take Zen Buddhism, go become a Sufi master, go get with the Sufi masters, or go to Japan or something like that. We don't do that. Because one thing we already understood is when you had a step 2, when you got an inkling of an understanding of a power greater than yourself, the meditative process had already begun. And I said the process. Excuse me. It happened really in step 1, but it's what happened in step 2. It was crystallized and it was formalized, and it didn't have nothing to do with a God. It did not. It didn't have nothing to do with a God. What it had to do with a person coming into a realization of the environment around them. From the sun, from below the earth to the top of the earth to the all 4 directions. That's what this step is all about. It's about becoming into consciousness of where you are through whatever means that excites your consciousness. That's what's so deep about step 2. Step 3 was easy. All you had to say is, good orderly direction, la, 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 la. But if you said, well, you know, I understand God to be this and that and this and that, and then you turn around and question that God, for example, here's a good example. This one happens all the time. A person has the death of a loved one, and they say, God, I mean, let me back up. Let me put it at the beginning. I mean, let me back up. So an individual is going through a crisis, and in this crisis, there's imminent death. And the person starts praying to God, oh, please don't let my mama die, don't let my baby die, don't let my dad, da. Please, God, have some mercy. Why is it death? Why is it pain? Why is it misery? Why is it? So the God goes into question. But my understanding was God was merciful, he was loving, he was caring, and I even got him as a he, right? So I done gave God a sex, I done told God what to do, I done told God how to be. There's a manipulation of the God process, and that's where the agnostic and the atheist really have a point. So moving on, and about to wrap this thing up, in the second step, it says we start through prayer, and prayer is the direction where that energy is focused to. Meditation is when I what? Open my mind up to my surroundings. Open my what? My consciousness. I open my mind up for a conscious. I'm past my own thinking. Because what? Even in the basic checks, in the 12th step, it says, we let our thinking go, and I'm just paraphrasing it, till the thinking what? Die a natural death. So we what? Become to learn to observe our thinking while staying in the what? In the moment. We what? We're past our thinking. We become observers of the thinking. What do we say about alcoholism and addiction? It's a what? A thinking disease. So if it lies in your thinking, that's what you want to get out of. And that's why a lot of spiritual programs, when they introduce meditation, what they telling you is this: you got to get out that fucked up thinking you got. You got to get past your own thinking. And how you get past your thinking is you become an observer of your thinking. You become your own observer. And you stay into the now. Because what our power is greater than ourselves that can derail us off the meditation, out of the meditative experience. And that's resentment, anger, and fear. Resentment, anger, and fear are the things that can keep us trapped from the past or into the present, especially when you're not happy with your own circumstances. If you're not happy with your daily circumstances, where do a person usually want to be? They want to jump on a fantasy vehicle and go and project into the present, and project into the future. Because the future is a drug that can make a person feel good. Or the past. And when they go into the past, they'll jump on some past experiences. So they don't have to stay where? In the moment. And meditation is in the moment. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us. Praying for knowledge, praying only for knowledge, only for knowledge of his will for us. Well, how do I know what that will is? I have to be in the present. If I'm anywhere but in the present, I will never know the quote unquote God's will, higher power's will, or to be consistent on how my energy is focused. So I'm trying to cover all three areas. That's what happened. His will for us. I have to be in the present. I can't be in the future talking about, I'm gonna hit the lottery or my 401k or all these plans I done made. No, I have to be right now. Because why? If I don't get past the present, there will never be no future. That's why we got that saying, one leg in the present, one leg in the past, and one in the future, you piss on the present. Anybody ever heard that one? It says, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and what? The power to carry that out. That's the same power that's in step 2, not higher power. It's the same power because why? The power will be revealed in the present. What power I need to use will be revealed to me in the meditative process. The next part about that, where it says, and the power to carry that, that's why it says the power to carry that out. That is what's being revealed. So let's say the whole stuff together. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him. Praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And usually, and I'm willing to bet, and I put my money on it, and I put my life on it, and I bet a fat man or a fat woman on it, that power will be through a principle. And it'll be something that'll take place in the here and now or the present, or the present. Because nothing happens if you can't get past the present or the now, ain't shit gonna happen. Your life is gonna be full of disappointment. So step 2, 3, and 11 runs together. Yeah. So that being said, I'm about to wrap this up. So it says, the topic is AANA, recovery steps 2 and 3. The difference. There's a difference between step 2. A power greater than myself, is not the same as a higher power. Anything could be a power greater than myself. I know, and I've heard people say, no, it's the same thing to me, and then, people there's all types of situations. You speeding down the street, you see the police, you slam on the gas. I mean, you step on the brake because the police is a power greater than yourself. The judge, you stand up there in court, the judge is a power greater than yourself. They say a gun, love, a baby crying. Remember that one? A baby crying, baby hungry, you go feed the baby. All that stuff. But a power greater than oneself is something that will restore you to sanity or change your thinking within the moment. It could be anything from a sunrise to a sundown to some money. So with that said, I'd like to thank y'all for listening. I ain't gonna hold you long. Put something in the comments and we'll deal with it. I'd like to say thank y'all for listening. And